Errol Flynn's Mulholland mansion wasn't just a home. It was a Hollywood fever dream of wild parties, whispered scandals, and shocking secrets. The swashbuckling star of Captain Blood built a reputation as daring off-screen as on, and his Mulholland estate became the epicenter of Tinseltown's most outrageous tales. From bizarre architectural quirks to whispered affairs, the house itself became as infamous as its owner. And when Flynn's life ended in scandal, the legend of his weirdest Hollywood mansion only grew darker. When talking about Errol Flynn, we cannot forget this big shock, which is his death. Reportedly, by 1959, Errol Flynn was living a life far removed from the glamour that had defined his career. However, years of financial mismanagement, legal battles, and heavy drinking had taken their toll. His legendary yacht, Zaka, which had once hosted star-studded parties and exotic adventures, had become more of a burden than a joy. Flynn's debts had mounted so high that he was desperate to generate income from any source. On October 9, 1959, he boarded a plane to Vancouver, British Columbia, to negotiate a lease of the yacht to local businessman George Caldo. Flynn was not alone. His companion on the trip was Beverly Adland, a 17-year-old actress with whom he was romantically involved, a relationship that had already raised eyebrows in Hollywood. The negotiations with Caldo proceeded, but Flynn's health was visibly failing. Friends and observers noted that the 50-year-old actor, though still striking, appeared older than his years. His hard-living reputation, fueled by alcohol, drugs, and reckless escapades, had left him weakened. On October 14th, Caldo drove Flynn and Adland toward the Vancouver airport for their flight back to Los Angeles. Along the way, Flynn began to complain of severe pain in his back and legs. What began as discomfort quickly became serious enough for Caldo to divert to the home of Dr. Grant Gould, a local physician and friend. When they arrived, Flynn struggled to climb the stairs to Gould's residence, moving with obvious difficulty. Gould assumed the problem was related to Flynn's chronic degenerative disc disease and spinal osteoarthritis, conditions that had plagued him for years. To ease his pain, Gould administered an intravenous injection of 50 milligrams of Demerol, pethidine. The medication provided relief, and as the pain subsided, Flynn, always a gifted storyteller, began reminiscing at length about his life. He recounted tales of his Hollywood triumphs, his wild adventures aboard the Zaka, and his travels that had taken him from the South Pacific to Cuba. Despite his reputation for drinking, Flynn notably refused an alcoholic drink when offered one that evening. Gould then performed a leg massage in the bedroom and suggested Flynn rest for a while before resuming the journey. The actor reportedly smiled and said he felt ever so much better. About 20 minutes later, Adland went to check on him and was horrified to find Flynn unresponsive. Gould and others immediately began emergency treatment, and Flynn was rushed by ambulance to Vancouver General Hospital. Despite their swift efforts, Flynn never regained consciousness. That evening, one of Hollywood's most notorious and charismatic stars was pronounced dead at age 50. The coroner's report and death certificate listed the cause of death as myocardial infarction, a heart attack, brought on by coronary thrombosis and coronary atherosclerosis. The report also noted fatty degeneration of the liver and partial cirrhosis, reflecting years of heavy drinking. A previous medical treatment for the removal of genital warts was even mentioned in press accounts after his death, a detail that underscored the tabloid fascination with Flynn's personal life. Flynn's passing sent shockwaves through Hollywood, not only because of the suddenness, but because his larger-than-life persona had seemed indestructible. He was survived by both of his parents, a painful reminder that the son who had once conquered Hollywood's golden age died too soon. His body was returned to California, and he was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park Cemetery in Glendale. In true Flynn fashion, 6 bottles of his favorite whiskey were reportedly placed in the casket, an irreverent tribute to a man who had lived boldly, loved recklessly, and died as dramatically as he had lived. Another thing that makes many people especially interested in Errol Flynn is his real estate properties. Among the enduring landmarks of Errol Flynn's early life, none is more significant than the small weatherboard home at 60 Duke Street, Sandy Bay, a peaceful seaside suburb of Hobart, Tasmania. Built around 1915, this unassuming cottage was where Flynn spent his formative years, long before Hollywood fame would make his name synonymous with adventure. Biographers and local historians consistently identify the Duke Street address as the actor's first and most documented home, a place where the young Errol absorbed the values, skills, and passions that would shape his legendary persona. The cottage's location, only a short walk from Sandy Bay Beach, gave Flynn an intimate connection with the water from the time he could walk. In his own memoirs, Flynn wrote fondly of the cove-like beaches and the sparkling blue of the Derwent River, crediting Sandy Bay as the place where he first learned to swim and developed the daring spirit that would define his later life. Local residents still speak of the shoreline as a playground for children of Flynn's generation, a place where small boats bobbed offshore and afternoons were spent fishing, paddling, or diving from makeshift jetties. These experiences nurtured a lifelong love of the sea, evident in Flynn's later passion for sailing aboard his famous yacht, Zeka, and his reputation as a fearless adventurer. The cottage itself, while modest, reflects the style of early 20th century Tasmanian homes: simple timber construction, pitched roof, and a cozy interior suited for a middle-class family. Flynn's father, Theodore Thompson Flynn, was a distinguished marine biologist and professor, and the family's choice of Sandy Bay provided both proximity to Hobart's academic circles and access to the natural world that so influenced their lives. For young Errol, the house was both a sanctuary and a launching point for mischief. Stories abound of his restless energy, early escapades, and the first glimpses of the charm that would later captivate audiences worldwide. Modern real estate entries and local heritage mentions continue to cite 60 Duke Street when chronicling Flynn's origins. The property has changed hands multiple times over the decades, and each sale generates renewed interest among Flynn enthusiasts and Tasmanian locals proud of their connection to Hollywood history. While renovations and updates have inevitably altered some details, researchers note that much of the original structure's surviving fabric, its exterior shape, location, and general layout, remains intact. Walking past the cottage today, it is easy to imagine a barefoot Errol running down Duke Street toward the beach, his hair tousled by the salty Tasmanian breeze. Next, among the many residences associated with Errol Flynn, none captured the imagination of Hollywood quite like Mulholland Farm, also called Mulholland House. Perched high above Los Angeles on Mulholland Drive in the Hollywood Hills, this was Flynn's most famous California estate and the one that came to define his off-screen persona as much as his swashbuckling roles defined him on-screen. Developed in the early 1940s, the property embodied Flynn's taste for drama, adventure, and extravagance, a sanctuary where the actor could escape the grind of the studio system while indulging in the pleasures that made him both adored and notorious. Contemporary profiles and later architectural research describe Mulholland Farm as a Connecticut farmhouse-style main residence spread across 10 to 11 acres. Unlike the Spanish Revival mansions that dominated Beverly Hills at the time, Flynn opted for a New England aesthetic, a deliberate choice that set his property apart. The main house, with its pitched roof, wide porches, and traditional lines, conveyed a sense of rustic charm amid the rugged landscape of the Hollywood Hills. Surrounding the main structure were extensive outbuildings, including stables, guest cottages, and service quarters, suggesting a self-contained retreat designed for both privacy and grand entertaining. Flynn reportedly moved into Mulholland Farm around 1941 to 42 when his career was at its peak following the enormous success of The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, The Seahawk, 1940, and They Died with Their Boots On, 1941. The estate's elevated position offered sweeping views of the San Fernando Valley on one side and Los Angeles on the other. For Flynn, who loved the sea and open spaces, Mulholland Farm was the perfect landlocked counterpart to his yacht Zaka. The property quickly gained a reputation as a hotspot for Hollywood parties. Period magazine pieces and society columns of the 1940s frequently referenced the raucous gatherings Flynn hosted there. Studio colleagues, starlets, directors, and curious outsiders found themselves drawn to the farm's sprawling lawns and poolside terraces. Guests recalled moonlit swims, live music, and impromptu fencing matches, a nod to Flynn's screen persona as the ultimate swordsman. The gardens were said to be extensive, with fruit trees, flower beds, and shaded groves that offered quiet corners away from the laughter and clinking glasses. Over time, colorful tales emerged about Mulholland Farm, some rooted in truth, others embellished by decades of retelling. Stories of hidden passageways, a private casino, and even secret tunnels connecting outbuildings have appeared in oral histories and memoirs of those who claimed to have visited. While certain details remain unverified or exaggerated, their persistence in Hollywood lore reflects the mystique Flynn cultivated. Whether every story was factual mattered little. What mattered was the legend of Errol Flynn and the home that became its stage. After Flynn's death in 1959, the original parcel was gradually subdivided, fragmenting what had once been his hillside playground. The area today includes multiple addresses on Flynn Ranch Road and Mulholland Drive, with some properties retaining architectural traces or landscape features attributed to Flynn's time. Real estate listings and local historians still point out elements such as remnants of garden walls, terraces, or pools that might date back to the 1940s. Another intriguing chapter in Errol Flynn's long list of California residences is the Bird Streets property in Hollywood Hills West, a 1920s Hollywood Regency-style home that reflects both the glamour of early Hollywood and the evolving tastes of mid-century Los Angeles. Perched in the Bird Streets area, a neighborhood famed for its dramatic views and celebrity addresses, this house became one of Flynn's lesser-known but frequently cited homes, a place where he lived during a pivotal phase of his career. The Bird Streets, with their distinctive avian-themed names like Blue Jay Way and Oriole Drive, had begun attracting Hollywood's elite by the late 1920s and 1930s. Flynn's choice to reside there linked him to a growing community of actors, directors, and producers who valued the area's privacy and sweeping vistas. Unlike the sprawling Connecticut farmhouse style of his later Mulholland Farm, this Bird Streets residence was more in keeping with the Hollywood Regency aesthetic, a style characterized by crisp white exteriors, symmetrical facades, classical detailing, and interiors that combined formality with modern glamour. The home's design lent itself to stylish entertaining while offering a sense of intimacy, a contrast to the wide-open extravagance of Flynn's better-known estates. According to real estate reporting and archival references from the Los Angeles Times, Flynn's occupancy predates the house's association with comedian and actor Paul Lynde, who would later purchase and remodel the property. The sequence of ownership recorded in the LA Times article places Flynn among the early to mid-20th century residents, part of the house's storied lineage. While the exact dates of Flynn's stay are not always precisely documented, researchers generally situate his time there within the period when his fame was on the rise, likely the late 1930s or early 1940s, before Mulholland Farm became his primary base of operations. The home's later transformation under Paul Lynde adds another layer to its history. Lynde, a beloved comedic actor best known for his work on Hollywood Squares and Bewitched, purchased the property years after Flynn had moved on. To bring the aging house into line with mid-century tastes, Lynde's ownership reportedly included a remodel by John Elgin Wolfe, the celebrated architect often dubbed the Hollywood Regency King. Wolfe's designs were synonymous with elegance and subtle opulence, and his touch likely introduced modern updates, sleek lines, expanded entertaining spaces, and an indoor-outdoor flow that suited the tastes of 1960s and 70s Hollywood. and 70s. Non-stopping there from the 1940s onward, Errol Flynn forged a remarkable and enduring connection with Jamaica, leaving behind a legacy that is still celebrated in Portland Parish today. The swashbuckling screen idol, already world famous for Captain Blood and the adventures of Robin Hood, found in Port Antonio a paradise that matched his restless, adventurous spirit. His Jamaican ties encompassed multiple properties: the Titchfield Hotel, a cattle ranch in the Boston area known locally as Errol Flynn Estates, and perhaps most famously, Navy Island, a lush retreat that became part of Hollywood legend. Flynn first arrived in Jamaica in the early 1940s, drawn by its unspoiled beauty and vibrant culture. Port Antonio at the time was a sleepy harbor town with breathtaking views of the Blue Mountains and turquoise Caribbean waters. What began as a casual visit soon evolved into a deep, personal investment. Flynn purchased the Titchfield Hotel, a historic hilltop property overlooking Port Antonio Bay. Originally built in the late 19th century and once a glamorous destination for well-heeled travelers, the Titchfield had fallen on hard times by the 1940s. Flynn's involvement brought fresh attention and a sense of excitement back to the property. While he envisioned revitalizing it as a hotspot for the international jet set, its operations were never fully stabilized under his ownership. His interests often lay more in entertaining friends than in management or profit. Nearby, Flynn expanded his Jamaican footprint by acquiring land in Boston, Portland Parish, where he established a cattle ranch. Local references frequently call this holding Errol Flynn Estates, and period travel writing from the 1950s speaks of the actor's plans to raise cattle and cultivate crops as part of a genuine ranching operation. Although the ranch was not a major commercial success, it embodied Flynn's love for wide-open spaces and the idea of building something lasting beyond Hollywood. The most legendary piece of Flynn's Jamaican adventure, however, is Navy Island, the small forested islet that sits just offshore from Port Antonio. Local lore claims Flynn won Navy Island in a card game, a story that has been repeated endlessly in travel journalism, oral histories, and even long-form features in Vanity Fair and The Guardian. While deed records do not conclusively prove this colorful tale, it has become inseparable from the island's identity. Whether won at cards or purchased outright, Navy Island became Flynn's private Caribbean retreat. There, he hosted glamorous gatherings of friends, fellow actors, writers, and adventurous travelers. Archival slides and photographs show parties under the stars, with Flynn entertaining guests against a backdrop of palm trees and lapping waves. The island became synonymous with Hollywood excess and tropical escapism. Flynn's presence in Jamaica helped put Port Antonio back on the map during a period when tourism was shifting toward Montego Bay and Ocho Rios. Travel writers of the era often described Port Antonio as the island's hidden gem, a place where authentic Jamaican culture thrived alongside high society leisure. The actor's patronage brought yachts, celebrities, and attention to the quiet parish, setting the stage for its reputation as a haven for the international jet set. Continue, among the most colorful anecdotes about Errol Flynn's early Hollywood years, is the story of a modest Santa Monica beachfront bungalow that he and a small circle of friends, including the equally charming David Niven, used as a weekend hideaway. In memoirs, oral histories, and later biographical accounts of the 1930s Hollywood, this seaside retreat is repeatedly nicknamed Cirrhosis by the Sea, a tongue-in-cheek reference to the heavy drinking, raucous parties, and uninhibited revelry that reportedly took place within its walls. Though less famous than Flynn's Mulholland Farm estate or his Jamaican holdings, this little bungalow captured the carefree spirit and reckless energy that defined his early years of fame. During the mid-1930s, Santa Monica's shoreline was a playground for film stars seeking relief from studio pressures. The area, then dotted with simple cottages and unpretentious rental homes, offered proximity to Los Angeles, yet felt far removed from the gossip and scrutiny of Beverly Hills. Flynn, newly catapulted to stardom by Captain Blood, 1935, and The Charge of the Light Brigade, 1936, embraced the seaside escape as a way to unwind. The bungalow, by most accounts, was not particularly grand, just a small, weathered structure with sand-dusted floors, salt-tinged curtains, and a few mismatched pieces of furniture. But its lack of formality made it ideal for weekends of spontaneous fun. The nickname Cirrhosis by the Sea first appeared in humorous recollections by friends and fellow actors who frequented the spot. David Niven, in his memoirs, The Moon's a Balloon and Bring on the Empty Horses, alluded to the bungalow and its wild gatherings, though he tended to romanticize rather than sensationalize the antics. Oral histories from others in their social circle, studio insiders, minor actors, and partygoers, corroborate the image. Evenings of drinking games, poker matches that stretched until dawn, and long afternoons of sunbathing and storytelling with the Pacific surf as a backdrop. The bungalow also reflected Flynn's need for freedom during the period when Warner Brothers was turning him into its signature matinee idol. The studio publicity machine was crafting his image as the dashing hero, but Flynn himself remained the restless adventurer who had sailed the South Seas before becoming a movie star. At Santa Monica, away from producers and journalists, he could relax, laugh too loudly, and drink too much among friends who understood his rebellious streak. Niven's presence, witty, polished, and equally fond of mischief, added to the camaraderie. Together, they cultivated a circle that included aspiring actresses, studio staffers, and even occasional established stars looking for a discreet, unpretentious party. Though the bungalow's exact address is not firmly documented, its existence is well attested in multiple biographies of Flynn and Niven, as well as in histories of the Hollywood social scene. Later generations of film historians and fans seized on the colorful moniker, which encapsulated both the romance and the recklessness of that Golden Age era. The nickname hints at the underlying reality of Flynn's heavy drinking, a foreshadowing of the health issues, including cirrhosis of the liver, that would contribute to his early death in 1959. Yet in the context of the 1930s, Cirrhosis by the Sea was meant as a joke, a badge of honor for a group of young stars who worked hard under the studio system and played even harder when they escaped to the beach. In addition to his more famous estates, Errol Flynn's life in Los Angeles left a trail of addresses that researchers have spent decades piecing together. These lesser-known properties, while not as iconic as Mulholland Farm or his Jamaican retreat, give a deeper sense of how often Flynn moved, rented, or entertained across Hollywood's hills and canyons. Archival listings, fan-driven compilations, and vintage real estate notes all contribute to a portrait of a restless actor who thrived on change and novelty. While not every location can be verified with surviving deeds, their frequent appearance across independent sources makes them valuable for understanding Flynn's geographic footprint in the city. One recurring address is 1652 North Cherokee Avenue, situated just off Hollywood Boulevard in a neighborhood that, during the 1930s and 1940s, mixed modest apartment buildings with smaller private homes. Local historians believe Flynn may have briefly rented or visited this property early in his stardom, possibly a convenient base close to Warner Brothers and the bustling Hollywood nightlife. The address appears in several fan-curated research sites and in era gossip columns, but direct county property abstracts tying Flynn to ownership remain elusive. Another colorful entry is 8946 Appian Way, famously dubbed Tiger Lil's Lair. Perched above Sunset Strip in the Hollywood Hills, this property's nickname reflects the raucous reputation of the neighborhood, which was a hotspot for bohemian artists, rising stars, and late-night parties. Accounts describe Flynn hosting or attending gatherings here, although, again, the surviving evidence suggests short-term residency or lease rather than long-term ownership. The LA Times and real estate retrospectives occasionally cite the address in broader discussions of Appian Way's celebrity pedigree. Among the most persistent entries is 4320 Cedarhurst Circle, better known as the Cedars. This grand 1920s estate has a storied history, having been linked to multiple film stars over the decades. Flynn's association with the Cedars is mentioned in multiple Flynn biographies and oral histories, placing him there during the late 1930s or early 1940s. The property's Hollywood Regency architecture and dramatic hillside views made it a natural fit for Flynn's swashbuckling persona, and party anecdotes tied to the Cedars reinforce the image of him as a host who enjoyed entertaining fellow actors, musicians, and studio executives. The address 5930 Franklin Avenue connects Flynn to Chateau Élysée, a famous French Normandy-style apartment hotel that served as a glamorous temporary residence for countless Golden Age stars. This property's historical registers and local heritage groups list Flynn among its celebrity guests or short-term residents. For an actor whose life was in constant motion, film shoots, location travel, studio obligations, Chateau Élysée offered both privacy and proximity to Hollywood's creative heart. Finally, multiple references point to Flynn Ranch/Flynn Ranch Road parcels that appeared after the Mulholland subdivision of his original Mulholland Farm holdings. When portions of Flynn's hilltop estate were sold or subdivided, roads and property records retained his name. Researchers often cross-reference these parcel names in county planning documents and real estate histories to trace the evolution of Flynn's holdings, even after he no longer occupied the land. These references don't always confirm direct ownership at every stage, but they illustrate how firmly Flynn's name became embedded in the topography of the Hollywood Hills. What do you think about Errol Flynn? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.